I've shared a video before about emotional health in the whole journey with infertility and IVF. This video is more specifically about navigating a specific loss and handling grief and some of the resources that I found with that. So our specific loss happened about a week ago. After 8 years of walking through infertility, we finally had our first pregnancy, and we got to live with that hope and excitement for about 4 weeks before at our first ultrasound appointment, we found out that baby was already gone. And so we've been recovering from that loss and experiencing a new level of pain, different than anything else we had had in our infertility journey so far. So I wanted to take time to share a little bit of the reflections from that, because I know I'm not the only person out here who walks through that type of thing. So I'm glad you found this video. So like I said, we had 4 weeks where we had every reason to assume that everything was going smoothly in the pregnancy. We knew that that was just running off of blood work results, but we had those results from like every 6 or 7 days, and HCG numbers were rising appropriately. So there was kind of every reason to hope and so much to celebrate because it had been such a long road to get there. So yeah, we made the decision to share, obviously, with family and some close friends pretty early on, just our extreme excitement. Everybody knew we had done IVF anyways, so that just made sense. And I'm so glad we did that because we had friends send like gifts like immediately. And like, these are still precious to me, a Colorado little onesie, because that's where our IVF was, and a wonderful little book. Yeah, it just made for a really treasured season. We like bought a stroller, and we also bought a car seat and stuff. Like, I don't know. It's always going to be hard and it's always going to be a mess, but I'm glad we celebrated in the way that we did while we did. And I know that I'll be glad that I have those when our next season of celebration comes along. So yeah, after we found out that we had experienced the loss, everything just kind of goes black. If you've experienced that, you know exactly what it feels like, whether it's with fertility loss or with something else. And I'd say 3 things that were helpful for me early on were knowing what to cancel and just canceling a lot. I canceled things for about 5 days, and then I am also really thankful. A second thing that was really helpful was just telling friends and family about our loss. So that included our church family, because they'd been praying for us through the IVF process, and like flowers kind of poured in and DoorDash gift cards and stuff. And like, I'm just at a point 8 years into my fertility journey where it's not like this private thing that I'm doing in the background by myself anymore. And I definitely had that season. We went through 4 or 5 failed IUIs where we weren't really telling anybody except a few family. But yeah, our journey has just gotten a lot more public as we've gotten farther along in it. And there's a lot of support that comes with that. There have been a few times where, painful comments or something that you wouldn't have had to experience if I hadn't been sharing wouldn't have happened. But I would say in general, yeah, getting to share has been a blessing because it means that people see us when we are experiencing loss too. So everybody's going to have to balance that differently, but that has been a blessing in my life. And if you're one of those friends who sent something, I cannot express how meaningful it is. So thank you. And a third thing that was really helpful is kind of knowing when to resume commitments. So for me, that was after about a week. I think people would know for themselves when it's the right time, but there is a point where you have to kind of rely on schedule and routine and let that be what gets you through the harder days and add some structure to kind of the no man's land that you end up in when you experience loss. So it doesn't mean that everybody that you're seeing is aware of that loss or knows what's going on. I've been teaching yoga classes and it's really nice. Basically, no one there knows what I've experienced. And there's just some really nice anonymity in getting to go and do routine and push on through things. So that's 3 things that stood out to me that have helped. But the other thing that's really helped is finding some resources that are specifically related to grief. And I've been a cheapskate on this and have not paid for any official counseling, but I did find a YouTube channel that's been really encouraging, Jo McRogers. She's a grief therapist. And then there's another one, Therapy in a Nutshell, that has been encouraging because it has like 30 video playlists on how to manage your emotions and how to kind of like develop a higher level of emotional literacy or something like that. I don't think she used those words. Those are my words, not hers. But both of those are licensed therapists who have made their resources available on YouTube. And so both of those have been a great blessing. And another really big resource that has been encouraging is Risen Motherhood. It's a Christian podcast that has a whole season that's about grief and motherhood, and how the love of being a mom always comes with losses at various points in time too. So they do a really good job of handling some really hard things. It's all from a like a Christian theological perspective, which resonates immensely with me, but might be a blessing to others as well. So I'm glad to mention it on here. So the way I wanted to just finish up this video and close the rest of my thoughts was by sharing a roadmap that Jo McRogers provides in her grief support and how it has applied to me in this season of walking through loss and our experience with miscarriage. So I'll have to look at my notes some here because I don't have it all memorized, but she just said that sometimes when you get put into the middle of something like grief, you kind of need a roadmap to get yourself out of it because otherwise you don't know really where you're headed. So the 4-point roadmap that she provides is 4 steps. The first is to accept the reality of the loss. The second is to experience the pain of the grief. The third is to adjust to life without your person. And the fourth is to reinvest in yourself and others. So yeah, with that first step that she mentions, to accept the reality of your loss, I feel like this kind of overlaps with knowing when to cancel your commitments. Because for me, canceling those commitments and not putting myself in a position where I need to act normal or be around other people is one of the ways that I make space to accept the reality of my loss. We had a lot of hope from our month in September, and so it kind of felt like a vacuum cleaner had just sucked all of that happiness out of our lives, and it was just me and my husband back to our normal, infertile, barren reality that we had lived in for the previous 8 years. It felt far more normal to be back there than it had felt to be in happiness. So experiencing not only the loss of the little life that we had celebrated, but just of that totally different emotional state of hopefulness to get to be in. Yes, just a lot. It's a lot to work through and it's not very fun. Another way that I've struggled with accepting our loss is that it was kind of like this emotional, like default coping pattern was just to pretend like the loss had never happened. And I know that's denial. And I've watched some other grief videos about how that's not the healthiest way to get through things. But I did definitely notice that tendency. And so I had to do the work of feeling the sadness of experiencing the loss. And that's kind of more emotionally accessible at some times than others, but a lot of times when I would check in, it just meant that I would end up crying again as I let myself experience and accept that that had happened and that that was a part of our story. It just felt so bitter that that needs to be a part of our story after 8 years of waiting. The second one that she really focuses on is experiencing the pain of the grief. And I could definitely have fallen into the category of being emotionally avoidant for a lot of my life. But by the time we got to this loss, I knew that I did need to feel sad about it in order to be able to move forward. And one of the books that has really helped me with that is really The Body Keeps the Score, which is kind of a definitive resource in the trauma, grief world about how your body is going to keep track of the losses that it experiences or the lack of safety that it feels, or whatever the situation is. Your body's going to keep track of it, especially internally, if you don't ever process it in a normal or healthy way. So that resource really informed, it taught me that I needed to carve out time on the day that we found out that we weren't pregnant and really let myself experience sadness. And that's just it just takes a lot of emotional work, and I didn't really want to go there, and I could tell I was kind of putting that off and trying to find ways to stay busy. But I'm so glad that I did carve out that time and made that that memory and that mental and emotional bookmark with myself. Even the Pixar movie about sadness and happiness, Inside Out or whatever, is just helpful for giving that vision of how valuable it is to learn to have that emotional fluency that can really recognize the different emotions that you're feeling. So I felt like experiencing the pain of my grief was not a very fun effort to involve myself in, but it was a step that I knew was necessary, and I'm glad that I prioritized it. And there were multiple smaller ways to continue, but that day of was what really comes to mind first thing. The third step that Jo McRogers provides on her grief map is to adjust to life without your person. And I'm so thankful that she specifically said this, because I was thinking about our loss a lot more in terms of the loss of the hopes that we had experienced with pregnancy. And it really was a good reminder that not only was I adjusting to that, it was I remember really clearly feeling one day this sense of loneliness in my own body because I had previously been getting to walk around with me and our little baby. And every day was this one step closer to the point when I would get to meet that little new life. And so I was thankful that she pointed this out, because pregnancy loss does represent the loss of that life and of that soul and of that being that's made in God's image. And so even though that's not necessarily what she was bringing to it from her worldview, it was a really good reminder for me. So another way that I felt like I had to adjust to life without my person was that we had lots of little visual reminders all throughout the house of our little person and of the season that September had been. Even if it was just like IVF meds that I was taking, I had to shelve all of those, or we had to fold the stroller up and put it somewhere else in the garage. Everything had to find a new space and a new place. And it was hard to find kindness for myself in that process, but I really did find a sense of comfort knowing that we were faithful to really celebrate while we knew we had a little life, and that we could now be faithful to grieve now that we didn't have that little life. So there's a lot to walk through, and it probably will still continue to crop up, but I feel like I've done a lot of the emotional work in the last 6 or 7 days that I've needed to. It's been more than 7 days. I don't know why I say that. It's been 10. The fourth step that she provides is to reinvest in yourself and others. And when I was listening to the video, I realized, I'm not really at that point yet. I was still very much doing a lot of the work of self-care and of trying to get up off the couch when it was time to teach piano lessons and just those little things, and finding ways to motivate myself, even if it involved eating sugar as my bribery to get myself up off the couch. Just finding a lot of generosity for myself and my need to walk through those days, as hard as they were going to be. I remember feeling a sense of dread when I woke up every morning and had to be reminded that this was my new story and my new chapter in my broader story and journey with fertility and infertility. So my heart goes out to anybody else that is experiencing those things and is experiencing them all in your own unique way. I'm going to experience it like I do because of my own personality and my own background and my own experiences and my own faith and my own worldview. And everybody else is going to experience it a little bit differently. But I know that sharing can be a way that we all get through it. So I have taken comfort with this fourth step of wanting to get to the point where I'm reinvesting in myself and others, and just knowing that time is going to help. And I've definitely already seen that be true, even in the short amount of time that we've been processing it. So I'm thankful for that. So a few other resources that I'll mention before I close with some of my favorite quotes from one of the books that really helped me during another season of loss. 4 books that have really encouraged me. One is Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering, and that's by Pastor Timothy Keller. And the scale of suffering that he has encountered in his ministry was so eye-opening and sometimes just cathartic, and gives perspective as I walk through loss to hear other people's stories of loss, and sometimes the way bigger scale or length of time that people experience it. It was not only helpful context, but also just a really comprehensive resource for the question of why suffering happens and how that does or doesn't threaten God's goodness and our perception of it. So Therapy in a Nutshell, that channel that I've already mentioned, and specifically her How to Process Your Emotions playlist, I'll link it down below. The 4 Loves by C.S. Lewis, I've just read an abridged version of it. That was an audiobook that is actually like C.S. Lewis's voice in a radio drama reading it, but I really appreciated how he highlights the different type of love that humans experience, and ultimately the sacrifice that's involved in opening yourself up to experience love. He makes an argument towards the end of the radio series, and I imagine his book, the full version of it too, that we all have a choice, that we can either open ourselves up to love and live with love and therefore experience loss as well, or we can close ourselves off to loss and pain and suffering, but we therefore inevitably also close ourselves off to truly experiencing love. And so that helped me in my own loss, and it gave a bigger context for how the two are intermingled. The 4th book is A Grace Disguised, and it's by Jerry Sitzer, and he lost his wife and several of his children in an accident to a drunk driver. And I think a lot of his work as a professor has also included a lot of ministry to others who have walked through pain and suffering, because I think he did that work really well and in a way that ministers to others. So I really appreciate that book, and these are the quotes that stood out to me from it that I'll use just to close our time today. The quickest way for anyone to reach the sun and the light of day is not to run west, chasing after the setting sun, but to head east, plunging into the darkness until one comes to the sunrise. The experience of loss does not have to be the defining moment in our lives. Instead, the defining moment can be our response to the loss. It's not so much what happens to us, but what happens in us. We do not always have the freedom to choose the roles that we must play in life, but we can choose how we are going to play the roles that we have been given. I've heard that walking through suffering can be kind of likened to a situation where someone is drowning, and that having somebody tell you about what a boat is, or about what a life raft is, or about what a life preserver is, really doesn't do you a lot of help during that time when you're drowning. What you really need is for the life preserver to be thrown to you and pull you into the boat, and for you to experience all of those things. I do think loss is like that. It has a way of pulling our lives apart, causing us to question our beliefs. And so, having walked through that experience a couple times in my journey with infertility and with some of our other experiences in Russia, I'm thankful for the role that loss has played in my life. And I do feel like it has enlarged my soul, given me more empathy for others. I'm not a very compassionate person by personality, and experiencing loss has helped me just learn how to be quiet or sit with people as they walk through it. So I hope that wherever you are in your own loss or experience or journey with any of that, or questions about suffering, that you have somebody who can sit with you, that you do eventually get those resources thrown into your life that help you recover from it, and that ultimately you might come out of seasons of loss with a really firm sense of what does hold things together. And I know my Christian faith has been the answer that I've come back to in this, and I love opportunities to share about that more deeply in my personal life with others. But I will just close by wishing you comfort and care, and a really near experience of the one who holds all things together. And I don't know what that looks like in your life, but I am thankful that you shared this time with me, and I am sending you a hug. Bye.